Welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of CRM Radio Today. The voice of the ever-changing customer relationship management space. With the voice himself, not Paul Peterson today, it's Stacy Gentile. Hey, Stacy.
2 weeks in a row.
2 weeks in a row. You must have done okay last week. They let you in again.
I'm out from behind the desk.
So who'd you bring along with you for the ride today here?
Well, today we've got Todd Cohen, who is often referred to as the nation's leading voice on building sales culture. Hello, Todd.
Hello there. How are you, gentlemen, today?
We are doing great. Todd, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of the path you took before you were rich and famous.
Oh, well, I don't know about the rich and famous part, but I am definitely passionate. Now, my wife would love to hear that. Unfortunately, I have to, we hide all the money, but no rich and famous here. Just passionate about my topic of everyone's in sales. For years and years, I ran, I don't even like to admit how many years. We'll just say I graduated college in 1980, none of your business. I've worked for a lot of different companies and managing sales organizations and running them and worldwide and blah, blah, blah. And the thing that always bothered me was we would invest a lot of money in sales training and training the sales force, and it just bothered me. So I always used to say, what about the rest of the company? Because everybody is part of that virtual sales conversation. Nothing gets done without lots and lots of people touching that opportunity, and it was very offensive to me for years when anybody on my team would refer to anybody as the back office or administration or those people. Again, it was just offensive to me. So when I left my last position as a global sales leader for LexisNexis, I struck out on my own to bring a voice forward that I felt badly needed to be heard, which is everybody in an organization. If you're breathing, you're selling. And if you want to grow the company, everybody participates. I mean, that's just one piece of it. Yeah. It's just something I'm very, very passionate about.
Well, there's definitely a need for it. I know a number of years ago, was probably around in 2005 when I was running my own big ad agency, and we really got big into experiential marketing and experiential branding on a similar note to what you're talking about. And we would go inside of organizations and build internal brand universities to help everybody understand that they're in marketing and sales, similar to what you're saying. And we're in a different time and era now than we were back in 2005, but I know when I would go into big companies, including some of the big Fortune companies, they'd often look at me like I was an alien with 6 heads when I was telling them this. Is that still happening today?
What's so interesting is, I do about 90 appearances a year between keynotes and workshops, and the majority of my work is actually to non-sales centric audiences, because that's kind of the point, right? We're all in sales, and I think that my message is really a whole company message. Now, when I do have the opportunity to speak at sales meetings, it certainly resonates very well. And to your point, as much as things have changed, they haven't changed at all in the last 30-some years. There's still a strong negative, stereotype connotation of the word sales and selling. And it's unfortunate because the larger world population has been victimized by the few slimy, perpetrators out there who give sales a bad name. And the reality of it is, if you've ever been on a job interview, if you've ever asked somebody to marry you, if you've ever asked somebody to go on a date, if you ever had to go to your boss to ask for anything, you're in sales. So sales is the province of everybody.
Absolutely. So do you think the corporate culture right now is more open-minded to these types of efforts?
It's a very interesting question. I think that when I propose what I do to organizations, it's rare when people say, no, not us, that, absolutely not, because people understand that, it takes a large group to make a client come to fruition. So I don't think that in and of itself is a mystery. I think that it takes business leadership that is really thinking long and hard about employee retention, customer acquisition, and customer retention to say, we're all involved in that conversation. It's not just the sales team. It takes somebody who is willing to think beyond lip service and intellectualizing my message and really think about the actual interactions that people are having day to day with each other and externally. So have things changed? Yeah, no. And, the current market, which is, we know, is very tight in terms of finding talent, is probably very receptive right now to this idea because nobody can afford to lose good people. And people want to know that they have purpose. People want to know that they have a reason for being there more than just what their job description says.
Right.
That's just my belief.
And coming, parlaying off your comment about employees needing to be valued and feel like they're part of the organization, and you just briefly talked about the job market. We're experiencing extremely low unemployment rates, but if you look at employee satisfaction scores across multiple industries, I'm sure that you'll see that most people are, well, I shouldn't say most, but there's like 37% or something like that of employees who are disengaged. And I think given a job market, do you think that employers are having to really go the extra step to keep people because there's so many more jobs now and people offering higher pay in different places, and how all that plays into what we're talking about here with the sales culture?
Well, I think employers are finally waking up to the fact that they're about 10 years behind in people development. I think that's the issue. Look, nobody wakes up and says, I'm proud to be overhead, right? And in 2008, when literally overnight millions of people were put out of work, there was this idea that, companies that are siloed, which is deathly for companies, and companies are become terribly siloed because silos kill companies. Well, if I'm in my silo, you can't find me, which means you can't fire me. And what we've seen in the last 10 years, and smart employers get this, is that silos kill companies because we're killing collaboration. And if you hide in a silo, what you're saying is, I don't really understand my value. What you're saying is, what you should be saying rather, and what employers should be encouraging people to do is saying, no. Come out of your silo and show me how what you do impacts a customer's decision to say yes. It may be you're the guy in manufacturing who puts the lug nut on a wheel, that gets the wheel on the car, that gets the car out the door, that gets the door in the hands of the customer. And you know what? If somebody didn't do that, the car wouldn't get sold. Therefore, indirectly or directly, you're in sales. You matter. Because if we didn't have you, something gets broken. Silos, which were previously thought of as a safety zone, are no longer. Employers, smart employers, of which there simply aren't enough out there yet. I see all kinds. However, the smart ones understand we're not going to have silos. We're going to bring them down. We're going to encourage people to understand their connection to the customer.
The biggest silo that needs to be broken first, and feel free to correct me on this if I'm misguided, I was always questioning why there's a sales department and why there's a marketing department. They're both in charge of revenue generation. Shouldn't they be working together? Because I think what happens in too many companies, they end up pointing a finger at each other.
To answer your question, yes, I am, as my one friend says to me, I'm in violent agreement with you on this point. Having sales and marketing in two different silos is a classic brew for mediocrity. I worked for a company where our marketing department was made up of extraordinarily bright, highly paid Ivy League MBAs who had never knocked on a customer's door. How can you sit in a vacuum and really be the voice of the customer, right? How can you do lead generation if you don't know what the market's actually telling you? And this is the problem. So, and then you have salespeople sniping at marketing because you're not giving me what I need. And then we just begin to see this degradation of relationship between sales and marketing. And I think a lot of companies have tried to correct that by saying, well, we're going to make a VP of sales and marketing, therefore we're going to collaborate. But that doesn't work either because there's always a bias or a preference one way or the other. Yeah, I agree. I mean, sales and marketing should not be siloed. They both fulfill extraordinarily unique and important roles, but they're not doing the same thing.
Your big push in the marketplace is that whole culture thing. So I think when you have those silos, you do get into those situations where it's their fault, it's everybody's fault but my fault. right?
Well,
so that can very easily create that
right.
negative kind of culture. And then once something like that takes hold in an organization, it's hard not to keep spiraling downward.
You're absolutely correct. And, when I do my keynotes and then I do typically follow-up workshops after that, a lot of times I have senior leadership in there. And the first thing I say to people, look, if you want to spend time pointing fingers at each other about why a client did not buy, you'll never get to the answer. So here's what you do. Every conversation from now in perpetuity begins with, or you look through the lens that says, how is what we're going to discuss going to impact the customer's decision to say yes? Because you see, that takes out all the nonsense. That takes out all the gray area, and that takes out the ambiguity, and it forces people to come out of their silos. And if I'm a senior leader, those who can't have that conversation are exposed very quickly. Look, employment is cyclical. We know this. There's going to be a time, it's going to happen, when we're right back to where we were 10 years ago. Hopefully not as bad, but there will be a downturn. That's what economies do, right? Smart employers should be bracing their people for this is how we will get through that next downturn, which is a sales culture, not a siloed culture.
Absolutely. And I still strongly believe that we're in an experiential economy where customers are buying experiences, maybe even more so than products.
Absolutely.
I'm not convinced that a lot of senior leaders understand that yet. And that's a concept that's been around, again, for a long time.
Well, without a doubt, Maya Angelou, the poet, said something very, very, very profound. Sometimes the best stuff comes from the places we least expect. And essentially, and I use this quote in my keynotes, people will forget what you say, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
So think about that for a second, right? If anybody in the organization is not wearing the lens of, I help this customer say yes, that organization is one that is guaranteed bound for problems. I'm not talking about just good customer service, because that's a minimal baseline. That's a minimal baseline. I'm talking about a proactive approach that says, as the HR officer, as the CRM implementer, by the way, I'm a huge fan of CRM because that's the mechanical way we implement sales culture because it provides transparency and visibility. If my product developer, if my IT people don't all understand that what they do has an incredible downstream impact on the customer, that company's in trouble. And I've seen it over and over and over again.
All right, so I think that takes us to the halfway point. We'll be taking a quick commercial break, and then when we come back on the flip side, Todd, let's talk about the blueprint and how organizations can kind of accelerate themselves into having these great sales cultures.
Yeah, that'd be great. Terrific.
We know you rely on your CRM system, and it's usually a love-hate relationship. Most CRM systems, well, let's face it, they're expensive. They're hard to understand. People don't use them properly. And you're probably paying for features that you don't even want. If that's your case, then maybe it's time to simplify. It's time to get more from your CRM. Why don't you go back to the original? Trust Goldmine. We helped pioneer the industry, after all. Goldmine CRM is, well, it's simple, it's affordable, and it's proven. If all those sound appealing to you, if you're just tired of the CRM headaches that you're getting from trying to implement something that's just too complicated, too expensive, and too much for you to figure out, then why not go back to the original? Visit Goldmine today, goldmine.com. All right, but don't hit that button yet, because we got more of the conversation with Stacy and his guest.
Okay, Todd, so let's talk about the blueprint. An organization's listening to us and they're like, okay, this kind of makes sense. How do we logically move from where we're at today to where the ideal place is?
Hiring me is the only logical answer. Now, of course, I had to throw that in there because that's the ultimate softball. So thank you, Stacy. No, seriously.
But truth be told, there are very few people doing this.
I believe that I'm way ahead. When I first started this 12 years ago, I started Googling the term sales culture, searching it everywhere, and there was nothing out there at the time. I mean, I found one white paper written 20 years ago that referenced it in line 13 of a 900-page discourse of some sort. But anyhow, here's where we start. Look, it has to begin with the leadership organization. It has to begin with an organization that says, we don't want to be mediocre. So there has to be a CEO, senior leadership commitment to this, because culture change is not easy. And I don't speak of culture change in sort of the classic, PhD academic, because frankly, that's way above. They're just too smart for me. I look at it from a street perspective. If you want to keep people, you show them how they impact the customer. You bring them out of the silo. Now, we've talked about that a little bit. I think the first thing to do, and this is where I begin my keynotes and my workshops, is we have to change the stereotype of selling. Because as soon as we say sales, people automatically run back into their silos. All of the culture change is, in this particular case, of a sales culture. It is not going to work if we don't change people's definition of what sales is. We all have a stereotype, right? The guy with the slick back hair selling you the 1970 yellow Gremlin, which in fact was my first car in high school. I'm not quite that old, but you get the point. I mean, I never forgave my father for making me drive that car, but hey, what the heck? And those old enough will remember that. And we have to change the stereotype. And what we do in my practice, in keynotes, workshops, whatnot, is I address the mindset and behaviors of selling. And what's necessary to show is that sales isn't something that we do and then we get to go back and do our other job. Sales is something we're doing with every conversation, because we're leaving an image which says build a relationship or don't. So the blueprint is redefine sales, help people understand how to answer the question, what do I do? Because you build relationships internally, you bring down silos. When I understand what you do, which is way more than your title. I think titles are the worst thing in the world. I had a CEO of a large insurance company I worked with. After hearing my keynote, and I spoke to 500 people in his company, they got rid of titles. They no longer have titles. People have to they're actually forced to build a relationship. Have you ever heard of something so horrifying, right? They're forced to have conversation. I mean, what a concept with each other.
And that's also a potential, I think, of getting rid of those titles to find untapped talent or untapped needs within an organization, because people will automatically fill gaps where they feel best utilized.
Without a doubt. Look, when was the last time you woke up and said, today's the day I'm searching for a mid-level senior account executive, level 4, division 3, tent 9, quad 7, building 42. Yep, that's the guy. I need to find that guy, right? I mean, what does that mean to you? Nothing. It doesn't mean anything to the outside world either. That's the problem.
No. And I mean, organizations, especially in the HR departments, I think they've been trained for so long to put a square peg in a square hole that
Correct.
They just don't understand how to just, right from even the interview process, to let people just unleash their own talents.
Exactly. It's interesting. A friend of mine works for Amazon, and I'm not a shill for Amazon one way or the other. And he said during his interview, I think he said one of the questions they asked was, what's your superpower? Now, I think that is a rather silly question, although I understand the point behind it, because now I hear it from everybody. I get people asking me, so Todd, what's your superpower? My superpower is I beat cancer 2 years ago. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I feel pretty good about that. Beyond that, it's all gravy, man.
Right.
The point is, you're right. We all have stuff we're passionate and we want to do. And I think smart HR departments get that. I think that they're trying to build opportunity for talent as opposed to the other way around, right? So we meet somebody who's got good talent. We find a home for them. We find a way to utilize them. Getting back to your point about the blueprint, it's a process where we show people how what they're doing is selling, how to answer that question, what do you do, in a way that's meaningful. We talk about building virtual sales teams. In other words, who are the people that you rely on that help you help the customer say yes? We talk about different ways to leverage past, present, and future relationships. I call that relationship portability. One of my hottest topics right now is the profound power of presence. The sale begins before you ever say a word. You make a buying decision the minute you lay eyes on somebody, right? It just happens. It's who we are. It's that image. And I teach people, especially those who are afraid of sales, that be present. Understand you have a choice on how you show up, and that will make a dramatic impact on whether that person feels warm and safe and good, or nope, I don't like the look. I don't like the feel, the vibe, the mojo. I'm going to find somebody else. As a CEO, I would be thinking, this is a world where differentiation is needed, right? There's so many things out there that have just become commodities. How do you build a sales culture and set yourself apart? It's the people understanding that everything they do is selling, beginning with how they show up. It's taken me 12 years to hone all this, right?
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate that I get to do this, and I love it, and audiences just love this message. And we talk about how to integrate it into CRM, as a matter of fact. And I know you're not asking me that question, and I'm going to share it with you anyhow. CRM is, as I said, it's the mechanical version of what I talk about. Because in a sales culture, we have transparency.
And good organizations leverage their data. So in summary, let me see if I can just close the feedback loop here. So organizations that really get rid of the silos and they build this culture where everybody's in sales, there's a couple of big benefits to this, right? You're going to get more customers, and when you've got more customers, you're also going to increase your lifetime value from them, right?
Right.
You're going to have happier employees, which means more retention and less recruiting, more institutional knowledge because you've retained your top tier talent. And the biggest hidden value in all this is that you let people go. You take the reins off of them, right? You unleash all of that talent,
right?
By not putting them in a box.
Exactly. I mean, and you hit the nail right on the head. And as I said earlier, look, people don't come to work saying, "Gee, I hope today's the day that I'm useless. I'm rendered, mute." People want to know how they contribute. And, I got to tell you, it's not just about money. People stay in jobs because they know that what I'm doing has impact. Well, how do we measure impact? We measure impact by profits and revenue, new customers, customer retention, happy customers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People want to contribute. To your point, we have to allow them to do that.
Right. So, Todd, here in closing, tell us a little bit about how people can reach you and what your kind of current promotions are at the time.
Well, thank you. So my website is Todd, Todd, Cohen, COHEN.com. Lots of information out there. Certainly email is todd@toddcohen.com. Pretty much the same thing. You can Google me, you can find me. Go to my website. There's contact forms and whatnot. I'm certainly all over LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and every other social media, piece out there. And would be most interested from hearing from people who get it, who say, you know what, I want to build a sales culture. I want to build a culture where we all understand that what we do matters. And most importantly, I want to hear from the business leadership that knows they're siloed, knows they have to do something different. And I have a toll-free number, 866-515-9445. So
awesome.
Happy to hear from anybody.
Yeah, and you've got those workshops too, right?
Yeah, keynotes, workshops, and I've written 2 books. One is called Everyone's in Sales, and the second book is called Stop Apologizing and Start Selling. It's about how we all get that lump in our throat when it comes time to ask. And it's
awesome.
Kind of yeah.
All right, Todd. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today to be with us, and it was quite a treat.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed myself, and thanks for keeping good products out there. My friend Gene Marks is a devotee of you guys, and I take Gene's lead when it comes to CRM excellence. So
we love Gene.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care.
You've been listening to another episode of CRM Radio Today. Brought to you by Goldmine, right here on the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners like you.